podcast for those who suffer, which is everyone.
It's a space where we can speak honestly about what it feels like to be in desolate places without losing hope.
Welcome to In the Thicket. This week we're talking about the experience of when loved ones suffer. Each of the three of us has had experiences of somebody who's very close to us, who's undergone or is still undergoing a lot of suffering. So we talk about what that experience is like, what is really difficult about it, what can help us in that experience, and where we found the Lord, even in those times where we feel so futile, to be able to alleviate the suffering of one that we love. We hope that it's helpful for you.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
I realize I'm thinking of saying hi to all of you listeners and then saying how's it going and realizing that you maybe can't say it back to me. But anyways, virtually, you can send us a message and let us know how you're doing today.
That's right. Or you can say it out loud to the air. That's fine.
That's true. And if you just automatically did that and you're like, oh, good, then that's probably a bit weird, but that's great. No.
Yeah, especially if you're on like public transit and you're listening in your earphones and then you're like, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest.
Oh,
I was just going to say.
Rachel.
Okay, I'll go. I was just going to say, if anyone in real life, like if someone says, how are you doing? You go, good. They'll be like, that's a little weird. I mean, that you clearly are doing really well, but
that's true. Yeah.
It might weird somewhere.
Or you're compensating.
Right. You're really not doing
like you are really not, but you just really do not want anybody to know that you're a basket case. Could be the case, you know.
We're all basket cases in some way, but anyways,
pretty much. Yeah.
I'm Nicole Richard, and these lovely ladies are.
I'm Erin Kinsella,
and I'm Rachel D'Souza.
It's great to be with you again on our podcast. Thanks for listening. How are you ladies doing? Rachel, how are you doing?
I'm well. I'm in Texas, which like I got here a couple weeks ago and I talked about it, I think, in one of our episodes already, but it's been cool because this week I kind of got more acquainted with the community. I've met some young adults in the area, just kind of, you know, I'm going to be here for 3 months. So it's kind of nice to just settle in a little bit. So it's been fun. No cowboy hat or cowboy boots yet, but I have had brisket.
Oh yeah.
And it was amazing. It was amazing.
Because I'm in Tennessee and I didn't really have brisket growing up at all.
No, me either.
And then I've had it here once or twice and I've just been like, oh.
Yeah.
It's good. When it's done right, it's done well. Is everything bigger in Texas, Rachel? Do you find that portion sizes and
you know what? I feel like, okay, so I'm in a smaller town in Texas. So I haven't had like a big city Texas experience yet. I will say the brisket experience was kind of like an everything's bigger in Texas moment, because we went to this kind of hole in the wall in the country place that's like known for its brisket. And it was amazing. Like the guy was so welcoming and stuff like that. And he I can't even describe how different of an experience it was. It was like another country that I was in. And then so we get to the counter and he takes the tray, like a lid off of this like tray where the meat is. And he pulls out this giant like chunk of like brisket, right? And then he cuts it for us. And then he just literally puts it on a tray. Like, you know, like a food court tray.
Oh yeah.
Like he literally just put meat on a tray. Like it was like, this is it. And because it's that good that you don't need to dress it up at all. You could just put meat on a tray and people will line up for it because it's really, really good. Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe Jordan Peterson should move to Texas then, because I hear he's on the carnivore diet.
Oh, is he? He should then, because it's where it's at.
It's where it's at, yeah. I do remember getting McDonald's for the first time in Texas when I was there. So for those who are listening, I was in Texas for 8 months when I was doing some grad work before. And the first time, I had McDonald's there. I was like, this is bigger. This large is larger. Like,
right.
Am I crazy? But apparently it's true. So, like, okay. Yeah. Okay, so fun thing. The day that this episode comes out is the day of my convocation from St. Augustine Seminary in Toronto. Yay! Which is super fun. So that's like all the stuff that's going on with me right now, because I was very grateful to be asked to give like a little address on behalf of the students of the Institute of Theology or whatever. It's something they started doing at the thing. So that's fun. And then I'm going up with a friend to Toronto. And we're going to stay like a fancy hotel, and I get to see a friend and her new baby. And yeah, so it's fun. So when you hear this episode, I may have convocated. Is that?
I think so. I think that's right.
Graduated.
Yeah, I'll just say I'll be graduate.
You will be a master
That's
of
right.
theology.
That's right.
That's
right.
the important thing.
That's right.
And we'll just have to always call you Master Aaron after that.
Yes, I hadn't informed you guys of that yet, but I'm glad that you're willing. That's nice.
Yes.
Good friends.
And like, of course. Yeah.
Sweet. How about you, Nicole? How have you been doing?
Good. I'm this is completely sort of changing subject, but I've been watching the Marvel TV show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh, I love that show.
I started it, I don't know, several months ago.
Oh my gosh.
I've just been like enjoying it and watching a lot of it, you know.
Oh my gosh, Nicole.
I'm almost finished all 7 seasons, and it's gonna be like, okay, after I finish Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I need to work on my PhD, you know?
Right. Okay, in between finishing Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and working on your PhD, can we just do like a sub in the thicket episode that's just the two of us just breaking down Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Because it's just a popular TV show that I swear to you, there's some episodes that are so good that I've literally had like theological reflections about them. It's not even like high literary stuff, but just...
Yeah.
What is this about? I've not even heard of this. Is it on Netflix?
I'm glad you asked. Well, it's okay. So you know all the Marvel movies, right? Yeah. Superheroes and such. So Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Remember, there's a character called Phil Coulson who's like, he's S.H.I.E.L.D. and he's always trying to prevent the Avengers or different people. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember who he's in the movies now. But anyways, he's kind of like trying to protect the Earth from any alien or weird stuff, which sometimes involves Avengers. So they kind of sometimes work together and sometimes they're a little at odds. Okay. So it's basically a spin-off of that character and his like team that are always trying to protect the world from various strange things.
Okay, sweet. Oh, that's good.
It's good. I like.
Aaron's like, okay, nice. That's
honestly nice. Like superhero stuff. I'm just like,
I get you.
Yeah. Like
that's most of my family, except for my brother and I. Were like, yes, let's go. Let's watch it.
It's like animated movies.
Yeah.
You guys give me flack for not watching the animated stuff. I don't like them. That's it, you know?
Okay. Animated. This is not animated. Well, it's probably actually heavily animated because aliens. Right. But yeah, I think, you know, it's funny. I was always kind of like, man, the genres of TV or movies that I like is heavily like action or like a lot of superhero movies or stuff that's really light and very kind of like not that deep, you know? But then I was talking with a colleague she's a clinical psychologist, and she was like, yeah, you know, I only watch like Marvel or like stuff that's not too deep because my whole job is like, you know, receiving the emotions and the deep stuff of, you know, I can't relax to dramas or things where it's more emotions. And I was like, yes, this is me, you know? Yeah. So I'm very, you know.
Okay.
You know, speaking of, well, actually, there's not really a good segue. I was trying to.
Speaking of, what about deep interior pain?
That's what I was gonna go with, but then I was like, that's kind of like our whole podcast, you know?
Yeah. That is true.
Pain, our topic today.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, our topic today is, I guess, a little different, but definitely still valid. But it's, you know, the suffering that comes when you're walking with somebody else who's suffering and probably someone who's close to you, you know. Now, we've done a couple episodes on accompanying others in suffering and, you know, how to do that well and how to, you know, what not to say and those kinds of things. But that's not really what we're focusing on here. This is more of, you know, how being with somebody when they're suffering and walking with somebody on their journey can actually cause like us suffering too, you know. And how do we go through that? So maybe we'll start with Erin, and just to share, you know, what's the situation that you've been in where you've been walking with someone who's suffering, and we'll each share.
Yeah, so I did ask permission from my sister to share, because I didn't want to come in and like bare all of these like very deep parts of her life without getting that permission. But it's been a really rough couple of years for her because she just had a really rough pregnancy with my youngest nephew, who's almost 2 now. And after this like rough pregnancy, then she had a C-section, and then after that she had some complications, and she had this emergency surgery where she almost died. She had like a issues with wound care stuff, and so she had like a vac dressing and like all of these things, like a lot of suffering in that 6 months after surgery of having that wound even heal. And also during that time, she had just pain. So she's had now this chronic and ongoing pain for almost 2 years that nobody has really, like, she hasn't really been able to get anybody to look at it because it's hard to get into specialists and pain clinics and things like that. So it's been really hard for her. And then she also recently finally got a diagnosis of PTSD for all of the things that she went through with my nephew, that's related directly to healthcare settings. So it's like every time she needs help for something or she's like really struggling and she has to go to the hospital, it's like the most triggering place for her to be. So it's like she needs to be there and go, but at the same time, it's incredibly hard and causes her suffering. And so for me, that's been like I've been like really directly supporting her in a lot of things. So from the time when my nephew was first born and I was living in Toronto still at the time, and I would come to Ottawa and like take care of this newborn and then bring him to the hospital to see her, and it was like back and forth. And that was really hard. And then also this long kind of drawn out wound healing, and then now trying to access services for like mental health, and she's just suffering, like she's suffering a lot. um and it's been so slow to get any kind of anything that will be really helpful for her, or to be able to find the right people or talk to them. And in the meantime, she's like suffering, but then she also has the added thing of like mom guilt. So if you're a mom and you're listening, um like Kelly has explained it to me a number of times, is because she feels like she should be doing all of these things for her kids, and she is doing all of these things for her kids, but then she feels like she's doing bad, or if she needs I don't know, extra support, or if she can't do something that she feels like she should be doing, it's like the guilt there is so immense because there's just these little two guys that need a mom, and she struggles to like
Yeah.
do some of the basic mom stuff, you know?
Mm.
Yeah, so that's been my experience the last couple of years of being with her through all of that and the hospital visits and all of those kind of things, which has been really hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Rachel?
Yeah, for me, I would say primarily my sister as well, which I didn't need permission because she literally did an episode with us. So if you want to know my sister's story, you could listen to, it's called Life's U-Turns, and we did an episode with her last season. But yeah, I think for me, so she has unexplained autoimmune illness that has resulted in several and like full-blown anaphylactic attacks where she's almost died and been hospitalized. And I think the hardest part for us as a family is the not knowing. So she's been relatively well in the sense that she hasn't been hospitalized and at death's door for a number of years now, which is great. But there are daily complications that came with it in terms of her exhaustion, her capacity to do different things, and lots and lots of doctor's visits, and just it was really, I mean, it still is really hard in some ways. I would say God has been very, very good to us in giving her situations. Like she moved from the high stress work of sort of political science and in politics to a relatively low stress work of being an artist in a certain sense, because she's able to do that because of her fiance situation and our family situation. And being an artist is not stressful if it's your loan and sole income because it's very unstable that way. But when it's a supplementary income, it's definitely something that, and you can grow your business, and there's creative outlets, and she's incredibly talented. So, you know, it's been beautiful to see God, and God's really called her to that. So it's also cool to see that calling unfold. So there's been lots of good in her story, but I think underlying everything has been this ask from God for all of us to just be kind of okay with complete uncertainty at all times. And I think for me, it has been, I remember when she first got sick, like the couple of years she was first sick, and I really saw her almost die number of times. It was very, it was really, you just felt completely powerless. You just realized like, oh my gosh, like my sister's life could just be snuffed out. You know, the first time I think I saw her in an ambulance, like with all her oxygen kind of gone, I was like, it was so surreal. I was like, oh my goodness, like this could happen. She could die. And I think those 2 years, there was a lot of talking in my family. We're very close. And so there was a lot of chatting about like, how do we live this now? Just like, she's out there in the world. Like you can't cage her up and like have her not live, right? So she's got to live, and there are risks. But the truth is, I think what I've come to is like, the truth is we all have to live with that. Like technically any of us could go at any time. And I think her life has taught me that. And it's taught me sort of like this surrender to just be like, okay, every time I spiral, just to remember, like, really, actually, she's not in a different situation than I'm in. So that was one tough thing. But the other tough thing with her was just watching her process her own reality and the grief that came with that, and all of the challenges that came with total upending of her life, and not being able to do anything, and just kind of just walking with her. It's really hard. I think we can all agree, both of you guys and anybody listening who has a loved one who has major crosses or sufferings in their life, like, which is probably everybody to some degree. It's just it's way more painful to see someone that you love go through something hard when you can't do anything than it is to go through something hard yourself, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, you know, the first example that comes to mind in terms of people that I've walked with in suffering is like my mom, who also I need to specifically ask permission because she's also done an episode. So if you want to hear that story in full, I think it's the first or second episode of our,
Yeah, second. Yep.
Yeah, second episode. But yeah, she. I remember the first time I realized like, oh, something is wrong, because I was, this is back now 8 years ago, I think. I was living away from home and just chatting with my mom on the phone, and all of a sudden she was just like, I'm so sorry, I'm just really in pain, and I can't talk. And then she just hung up. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. What's happening, you know? And she ended up needing to go for surgery. And so she had the surgery and then was recovering. And then her recovery kind of plateaued and then declined. And then for about 2 years, we were just uncertain what was happening. And she wasn't able to eat, and she was in a lot of pain. And we didn't really know if she was going to live or die. And she was in and out of the hospital a lot. And so that was, yeah, that lasted a few years until then a couple of years ago, now 4 years ago, she had another surgery, and they figured out what was wrong, and and she's been kind of getting better and almost pretty much back to normal now for a while. But for that 4 years, it was just like, yeah, it was just a strange kind of time where my life was continuing to move forward. I finished my undergrad, internship in that time. I started a new job, and then I started my own business as a music therapist, and then I got hired full time and started my career in a different way. And so I was doing all these things, and my life was kind of moving forward. But then there was also, I was starting this new job, and then I was also kind of cooking all the meals and helping out at home and trying to support everyone. I'm like oldest child, got to take care of the family, kind of thing. And just kind of going through all that. So that's been, I think, one of the most, I know, of course, I'm sure most of our listeners too, and you guys as well, like, have had experiences of just supporting friends in hard times. And that kind of, the three of us support each other a lot. We have a little texting group where we're asking each other for prayers for for this or that or this person or that person.
Mm-hmm.
But just like, I think all three of us were, yeah, talking about a family member, and that's just, it just hits you in a different way, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. How have you guys found that walking with your sisters has impacted you? Like, you shared a
Mm-hmm.
little bit about that, but I wonder if we can explore that a little bit. Like, what kind of process were you going through? What did you have to work through? How did it impact you?
Yeah. I think for me, when you're talking about like cooking and being the one at home to like support people and all of those kind of things, I think that was definitely like I certainly stepped into that role for a while, especially when things first happened with my sister, and because I was like taking care literally of a newborn and of my 4-year-old nephew, and so it's like you don't have time to like really process anything or kind of think about what's happening. Um, and I think I just realized really the other day, like, so just this past week, we ended up having to go to the hospital and we sat in Emerge for 9 hours. By the time we got through to the back and actually saw somebody and had some things set up and were able to leave. And it was the day after when I was driving to my sister's house because I usually go out there once or twice a week to like help with the kids and do whatever. And while I was driving, I was just like weeping like the
Yeah.
whole drive because it's almost like the Lord was opening up this space of like you feel something about this. Like you feel something about this,
Yeah.
um which I think like I'm pretty good at like shoving those things, or you know what I mean? Like, and I know that they're there, and it's not that I won't, don't it's not that I don't want to feel them or that I want to ignore them or anything like that. It's just that I recognize that there are limits to my capacity, and that if I'm going to be there for my sister, my family, whatever, in the way that I need to be there at that particular time, then it's kind of a necessity to like shove those things a little bit. And it's like responsible, because then I can be present to these two little kids and and her, and yeah. But it was like in that moment where I was like I was thinking that there's a lot of fear that I have. Like there's still a lot of fear that I have in the unknown. And I think that's what's hard for me most, is because it's not really resolved. So even when I'm sharing this right now, like,
Mm.
and I'm sharing it in a responsible way, like I'm not destroyed and, like
Yeah.
anything like that. But it is still very, like, it's very raw for me because it's not resolved. And so there's still like, if I get a text sometimes from her, I'm like, okay, what is it gonna be? Or like what is the future gonna look like? Or and it's like a lot of the what ifs creep in everywhere because those are
Yeah.
definitely like huge for me, like what if something happens to her? What's going to happen to the little guys? Or what if, like she doesn't get seen by the right people? Or what? There's like a million what
Mm.
ifs. And because part of my like I want to love by solving in a lot of
Yeah,
ways
right,
sometimes,
right, right,
like I know that's a tendency that I have to like offer solutions and things like that, which is not always what's necessary, but sometimes it is actually useful. But
Definitely.
so it's like my brain is like anticipating that before it even happens. Um, and so that I find is has been one of the hardest things. And then also just to find ways of like really feeling the pain of what it's like to watch somebody that you love just like ache, especially because like I know that suffering can be crushing, like I know that it can be. And I know for me that I can, like I've come to this place in my own suffering or whatever, that I can process, or I can join it to the Lord. But even for my sister, like she's coming along in her relationship with the Lord, and it's still like being kind of worked at, so there's not the same capacity or the same like um I guess like regular relationship with Christ. Yeah. Yeah. To be able to process that. So then that's scary too, of like, okay, what if it crushes her? Like,
Yeah.
what if it does? It's like another what if. So that's a lot of what ifs for me. But yeah, but that's what's hard, most hard, I think.
I think in some ways, a loved one's suffering, like it's the most difficult kind to process when you think of God's love. Like I think in my own life, like it can be like, oh, I'm suffering, the Lord loves me. Like eventually, I mean, sometimes even when I'm suffering, I'm like, well, I get grumpy about it. But like
Yeah.
when I see someone that I love suffering, my sister, but even other people, I think on a regular basis, like even when I hear about family or friends, or even Erin, your sister, or, like people that we know that we ask each other prayers for, I think sometimes the stories that I hear, like it crushes me. Like I'm like, how Lord, like, why would you let these people go through this? These people love you, they're good, or like even forget they're good. Like they're just human beings, like, like leave them alone.
Yeah.
And it's like God is
leave them alone.
Right. Yeah. Which in itself tells you, right, like what a seed of doubt that suffering can plant in my heart. Because I mean, the truth is God has control and he does allow these things, but to trust that he knows what's best for people. When I look around and I see people in so much pain, I think it's probably the most challenging aspect of life for me when I think of God's love. He answers that challenge often, and I think it's just a mystery of how he answers it in my life, and there's a peace that he will give me. But the question always comes up for me when I see someone suffering that pierces my heart, which happens probably weekly, honestly, because there is a lot of tough stuff out there and close and nearby a lot of times. And I really have to go to the Lord. And sometimes I have to just be like, why would you let this happen? Just to get the question out of my system, because it's so like confusing. It can be so confusing. So I think it does call me to deeper relationship with God, because there aren't answers there. There's not an answer. He doesn't give me the why, but he does give me his presence. But it requires an openness on my part. And it's tough. It's tough sometimes.
And it's so funny to like trust, like I can trust you, Lord, with my life, but I can't trust you with someone else's. Like,
right?
That's kind of what both of you are saying, like Erin, all the what ifs, and then Rachel like talking about this, like, do I really trust the love of God if this is what's happening to this person that I love? I love this person and you love this person, but if I had control, I would not let this happen to this person. So what is going on? There's like a different kind of, I think of trust and surrender to like a video game. I don't know why I don't even play video games. That there's just like all these levels of trust and surrender, and like if you're trying to trust and surrender on like about something that's happening to someone you love, I think that that's like not even on the linear levels of the video game. It's like this secret other like dimension that you get portaled into. You didn't actually mean to go there, and all of a sudden you have to like solve these extra levels, and it's like, why,
I love that.
Yeah, like the enemies, the bad guys that you have to beat are like totally different characters, and you're like, what? But I can't even. Yeah,
I did not sign up for this. I don't want to surrender this. Just let me go back to just why do they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's like a whole other like level of like if we're talking about divine providence, right? That the Lord only allows things to happen to me that are for the good of my salvation, period. Like period. Or that he will use for my salvation, right? And so if that's the case, then like that has to be the case for my loved ones, yeah, but it's even like there's part of the pain of like sometimes not even being able to communicate that with a loved one, or to be able to talk about that with a loved one, because it is one of those things of like, well, what you're undergoing now is just purification, so just thank the Lord for your experience, and like frig, like just punch me in the face.
I know. And I think that like, I don't know, I get very careful or very, I don't know, picky about wording with this kind of stuff, because I don't like, we've talked about this in other episodes, but people are like, well, God sends everyone just as much suffering they can handle, or whatever it is. He won't send you more than you can handle. And I'm like, no, there's people go through stuff all the time that's way more than they handle. And God didn't send it. That's just the world sucks,
Yeah.
So like nothing bad was sent by God. None of
Yeah.
suffering was sent by God. But that God is the source of all creativity, and so we'll use that for something good. But it's not good. Like I just, it's just not good. So I'm not criticizing either what one of you said, but I think that it is like challenging. And yet, though, we have this belief that God will use this, that there's going to be something that good that will come out of whatever it is. But it's hard to look at someone else going through something. You're like, how, what,
Yeah.
And I think, I was thinking about my own experience when my mom was sick, and thinking about like surrender and trust and those what ifs. And I remember this moment where I was just realizing like she might die. Like she's essentially dying and we don't know why. She's being kept alive by all this IV nutrition stuff, but if we didn't have all of this crazy medical care, she would not be alive right now. So this is already borrowed time kind of thing. But I like couldn't psychologically handle the thought that she might die. It was like whenever I went there, it was like, nope, can't go there. It just felt too overwhelming.
Right.
And I remember praying and was just like, God, is it okay? Like I can't deal with that kind of anticipatory grief right now, especially when she might be okay. She might live. Like there's still this chance. Like, is it that I just assume that she's gonna get better and not even entertain the possibility that she is gonna die? And then if she does, you can get me through that because that's gonna suck. But otherwise, I'm just not even gonna think about it. I'm not gonna, And I remember just feeling like at peace with that. I was like, okay, even if this is just like a perhaps not the best defense mechanism, whatever, it's okay if that's what I do, because I just couldn't handle a lot of it. And so, and when I was thinking about that, and for me, it felt like a decision to hope. Is it okay to decide to hope? But I've talked with people in different times about that, and like it's like hope plus kind of a denial,
Yeah.
So a mixed bag of whatever was happening psychologically, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily a complete surrender.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So I don't know. It's complicated.
It is. And there's layers. Like there's so many layers, because even I think about like with my sister, and like there's refractory pain that goes out from pain too, right? Like it's like with your mom, it would be like the pain of your siblings and the pain of your father watching it happen to his wife. Like I still remember their faces when they were on here, like talking about it, and how emotional your dad was, like speaking about it, like seeing that kind of pain from somebody else who loves them, even, like these two, like I think about these two little boys, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like the loss of a mother. And I know it's like, that the Lord is bigger than that. Like I know that he is, and I know that he's good, but it's like when thoughts and feelings come up against what is known by the intellect, it's like it's such a tough place to be, and it's very painful. And even that's part of the pain, is like knowing that this and not being able to like believe it or to feel it.
Well, and I think just went really quickly, and then but just I think what you're saying, Rachel, that Erin, is that like when we're feeling the pain of all of this stuff and the suffering of what someone else is suffering and what others are going through, and feeling that, and we're like, I know I should be able to trust God, I know I should be able to think that God is good, I know, but right now I can't because I just feel it. And I think that's just really real, and I think that's just a part of the whole process.
I was just gonna say, I remember I guess our episode on infertility, when they were talking about the differences between their experience about whether, they were going to get pregnant or have a child one way or another. And I could really relate to the sense of like the pessimist, just being like, well, it's never going to happen because we have all this data, and the data like it hasn't happened for 8 years or 9 years or whatever, and So it's not, how can I believe that it's going to happen? And I think that for me is very like my mom in our family is someone who's been praying for my sisters, like just total healing for years, you know. And to be honest, like my sister is so much, in some ways, so much better, like, or at least the circumstances, God's given her circumstances in which she can live, you know, well with her condition in a certain sense. But I couldn't do that. Like my mom could pray for my sister's total healing, and I would pray for my sister's total healing, and I still do. But there's just this part, this stubborn part of my heart that's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. It's like, you could heal. I know that God could heal her, but I really struggle to believe that, because I'm like, you haven't. Like, you could have healed her right away, or you could have not let it happen. I think it's just, for me, the data is really hard to ignore, the worldly data. And I think recently, you know, I've had many conversations in the last year with different really wonderful people of God who keep telling me about, you know, having great expectations. I remember we did another episode. This is like an episode filled with like episode references. So
Totally.
it's not on purpose, I promise, but there you go. We had another episode called Radical Hope, where we talked to these family friends of mine, and they were, you know, one of them who's working through a cancer situation right now. And they were like, they have this incredible, high, great expectation of God that maybe not everyone's called to, but they feel really called to. But I just couldn't fathom having that kind of orientation toward God in a situation like that, you know. But I've encountered so many people recently who've said, God doesn't want us to stay mentally sort of in the limitations that we decide are his, like, stop limiting him. And I don't know what that means. I think that requires a lot of discernment and prudence, but it also requires a kind of surrender and abandonment, that it's even possible that God could exceed expectations, that it's possible that God is not at all limited in this situation. And that I maybe should, and I think this is true. I think I should be open to that possibility, because it's the truth, you know. And then God can give me the grace, if he so chooses, to accept that maybe that is not his will in this case, and to accept that he's writing a different story. But to go into it at the outset just assuming the worst, in a way, is not necessarily strong. I think it's actually quite a weak position, and I struggle with that big time. I feel like I'm really good at assuming the worst, accepting it, and moving on, you know, just being like, okay, it's gonna suck every day of my life.
We like holyify it, if that makes sense. Like I don't want to pray for something that is not God's will. Like, if God has sent this and he is, you know, or not sent this, we clarified already, God does not send these things.
That's right.
But if he's allowed this to happen in his permissive will, you know, then like, who am I to say, I don't know, no to that? Or like, there's like, it's like a weird, which is not right.
Like, I guess I'm just gonna suffer.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is very weird, because that's not God.
You know, and there's an insight here too, I think, because I don't think we do that when it's someone else who's suffering. We're not just like, well, I guess this is just God's will for your life. We are like, no, this shouldn't be happening, and we fight for them most of the time, you know. Perhaps that's where we are. So it's just maybe a little insight of like, okay, so what about for us? Can we have the same kind of hope and trust to, like, not maybe fight for our own healing, but expect that, you know, just the same way that we hope for that and expect that for others. I don't know. I wanted to ask you guys, like, you both shared about how walking alongside someone who's suffering there's suffering in that for us too, right? And then we need support. So what has helped you guys in, you know, who's accompanied you while you're accompanying others, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can say for sure that you guys have, because like Nicole was saying, we have like a group chat. And so I'll put in the chat when something is happening, or when, you know, we just need prayers for my sister or for something that's happening. And it's such a gift to say, like, Rachel's, okay, I'm going to adoration, or I'm going to pray the rosary down. And Nicole's like, okay, praying, yes, on it. Well, okay. And then
and then our secret fourth member, whose name I just about spilled right on that episode.
Oh,
Yeah, and then she'll say, okay, praying for at mass, or and it's like these little concrete things that I'm like, okay, the burden is not mine alone to carry, because sometimes I feel so much like that, because and it's not like, I think some of it is healthy and some of it is unhealthy, right? Like, some of it is healthy in the sense that I don't want to dump my, I don't know, baggage on other,
Yeah.
or like, um, or like kind of like dispose my pain onto other people
Yeah.
in a way that's not good for them then. But then some of it is unhealthy, because I'm like, I need to be the one to bear this burden or whatever, because I want
Right.
to spare like other of my family members from, having to
Yeah.
feel pain that I'm feeling or whatever. So that's been helpful. And then the other thing that I found is helpful, I keep thinking of these things over and over again, is like Ignatian spirituality, and the rules for the first week, and one of them is, in times of desolation, to believe that the desolation will end soon. So not even
Mm,
to hope that it will end soon, but to believe that it will end soon,
mm,
because it's yeah, it fights exactly against like what we were talking about the, like, here's the rational data, like it says that this is gonna go on for another 6 years before, like, whatever like
Yeah.
something like that, but to believe that it will end soon, because it's a source of hope, and because it actually is saying something that's true about God, in
yeah.
that he is always working for the good, and he is always working to, like, resolve things, or to heal pain, or to, like, he's always working. So in that sense, it's true. And then in one sense it's hard, because sometimes it's like, if we hope and then something doesn't change, then
Yeah.
it's like it's
Worse.
like yeah, exactly, yeah,
Isn't
yeah.
that so true? You're like, I'd rather just be miserable forever and
That's
know that that's
correct.
what my, life is, rather than like hope that it might be different. And then
Yeah.
I am miserable
Yep.
forever.
Right.
And that's worse. The misery is worse.
Hope
Yeah.
gets back into that uncertainty of, wait, maybe it could get better, but then maybe it won't. And I think that's harder to tolerate almost,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
But I think that there's like another angle to that. I think there's like what we want to change, which I think should bring to the Lord and
Hmm.
have great hope in. But also there is the idea of walking with God in it, which sounds really lovely. And it's a lot harder than it sounds, like less lovely. It's more like, Calvary-ish than like pastoral walking through the fields. But like the thing is, I think, and this is the greatest comfort for me in my own suffering, but also in the suffering of others. Like when I look at the Lord's life, and I look at the passion, and I look at the crucifixion, and I look at the resurrection, like I really understand, okay, Jesus came to be with us in this and to get us out of it, like to show us the way out. Like the resurrection is the goal. Like it's not, the cross is not the end. The reason we hold up the cross is because it is the mode of our victory. Like that is the way that God chose to show us that even death does not have the last say, like period, and I think that is the thing that I had to keep reminding myself of, like, okay, I believe in the God who literally defeated death. And so his will for my life and for the ones that I love is the best. It just is the best. There's nothing else. And so I think when I remember that, it gives me, I think there's certain virtues, right? Like that we need in different kinds of times of our lives. And I think when it comes to watching the suffering of another person you feel really powerless about and you love them so much, you need courage. Like you need courage.
Yeah.
You just
Absolutely.
need it. And we can't just make it happen. It's a grace. We have to ask for it. But I think God wants to give it to us.
Yeah.
And I think it is the thing that allows you to then decide, okay, right now I'm going to put my emotions aside so that I can do the things I need to do to be there for this person.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm going to be brave enough to look at my emotions so I can process them, so that I can be fully present and alive and like not this oppressed, repressed, like pain person, So all of that requires incredible amounts of courage that only God can give us, and he wants to. So I think that for me has been a huge game changer, because anytime I start to feel that kind of oppression, I think now I'm just like, it's not even about feeling better. It's just like, okay, this is a sign that I just need grace. Like I just need it. And so I'm going to just like, you know, we were talking about prayers and stuff like that. I think that's sometimes. I remember one time, this is in my own life, we were on a call together and I was like, guys, I just am not strong enough to hope. And Nicole was like, Rach, I will hope for you. Like, I'll hope for you. And sometimes you just need someone to hope for you. So just ask, you know, and you can get out of bed, let someone pray for you that you can do what you need to do the next minute. And I think that's like, that God wants us to do that for each other, and that it's possible then to experience a little bit of relief from that,
like a shared
burden. Yeah.
It's interesting that you talk about courage, even because there's like two like subcomponents to courage, and one is, this is like a theology lesson, like one is attack, which is the kind of courage that you need when you're like doing something, right? And then there's also endure, and that's patience. Like that's when you have the courage to withstand something that is difficult, you know, and that's like part of it too. But like even a concrete thing of what you were talking about, Rachel, like walking with God, like I totally experienced that in this last trip to the emergency room, you know, because before we went, I prayed to the Lord, like I need you, Jesus, to bring us the people that she needs. Like we need to see the people that she needs. So I'm just like, I need you to do that. And then when we were sitting there, we were so long in the outside part of it without going back. I was like, I'm gonna flip my lid. Like they're gonna have to admit me because I'm gonna lose it. And like I was like, so I'm like praying to Jesus even in that. I'm like being desperate, like I need you, Lord, to take us into the back, please. And and it was like in that moment I just felt him saying like, you already asked me to bring you the people that she needs, so I need you to trust me now. And it was, we were out there for a little while until just after shift change, and then we went back into the back, and every single person that my sister spoke to was the most compassionate, the most excellent like healthcare provider. Like she spoke to beautiful people, like oh, you know. Yeah, so it was like, it was just an affirmation for me of like, oh, you actually do listen, like you actually do things for.
Just waiting for the shift change, just like hang tight, you know.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah, you know, when I think about what's been helpful for me when I'm accompanying others, and I love both of what you're both saying, and I think my mind goes to really practical things. But I'm reminded, like Rachel, when you brought up the passion, it's something clicked in me. Like, oh yeah, so Mary was accompanying Jesus, right? So she had, you know, those are the like the sword piercing her heart. She was suffering. Like, what an example to us. But then, what did Jesus do on the cross? He gave her someone to accompany her. He gave her John, right? And I just, in my experience, I remember with my mom, like I'm like we all need a John, you know. If we're gonna be married in life, we need to ask the Lord to provide us with a John, like just somebody to also accompany us while we're accompanying this person, right? And I remember, I don't think I really had that when my mom was sick, because because I remember, um, there was like, you know, and part of it was, you know, my whole family was doing this. We're all trying to kind of take care of each other. I'm like, okay, I'm processing all this stuff about my mom, but I can't go to my dad because like he's her husband. So he's got it 10 times worse. Like, okay. And then, okay, my other siblings are maybe out of town and they're also younger than me. So I can't go to them because I have to be strong for them. So, all right, I'll just white knuckle it, you know? And so, and this wasn't a conscious thing that I was doing, right? It just kind of happens. And I think, Erin, it's like you're saying, there's something that's healthy in that, right? You're trying to do what you need to do. And that's like where humans are able to do that and compartmentalize a little bit for a reason, but it just kept going forever. But I remember this one time where my mom was in the hospital and I was, you know, just there kind of taking my shift of hanging out with her. And she had other visitors and people who came in. And so one family friend was coming and visited and hung out with my mom and I for a little bit. And then I just walked her after at the end of the elevator and she just said, like, how are you doing? And so I was like, you know, yeah, I'm okay. Just, you know, trying to just go day by day and just trying to trust the Lord and da 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 da. And she looked into my soul. She's like, but how are you doing? And I felt like whatever Pandora's box of emotion
Yeah.
I carefully kept bottled up, it cracked open. And I was a mess for the rest of the next couple of days. Like, I remember going home later and I had to drive my siblings somewhere, and I was just like the worst jerk. I was getting mad at them for everything. Like, they were all really quiet, like they were afraid of me because they didn't know, and they were just kind of like, what's wrong with you, you know? But it was just that I had all of this stuff to process that I hadn't processed with anyone. And then all of a sudden it got kind of unleashed, and now I didn't know what to do with it. And I was mad at the lady for unleashing it, but really it was stuff that I need to work, you know? And so it just made me think, like, gosh, you know, I didn't know. This was a learning experience for me, but realizing, okay, if I'm going to accompany someone, I need to be also doing that, you know, as best I can with like having that self-compassion and responsibility to also have, and you kind of both have mentioned it, but like to have also an outlet for myself to, you know, to have a John, whether that is like, actually,
I know. I was thinking when you said that, I was like, that's also.
I'm gonna pull a homeschool card, okay, guys? Like, sometimes I say things that are not, you know, I don't realize how inappropriate they are until later.
Do you know what we're talking about, Rachel?
I did just realize that.
Okay,
I was like
yes.
completely with you, Nicole. Like in terms of like, I didn't think of how it sounded.
So
to
right
be
away, I
honest.
thot, oh my gosh, that's a guy who engages prostitutes.
That's a pimp. Yeah,
And I was trying not to laugh because she was sharing
Whoopsies.
something very profound.
I literally, if you hadn't realized it, Nicole, I would never have realized it. Like this, we would have, everybody listening has probably realized that just exactly what Erin did. And Nicole and I were just like at the passion, you know, at the foot of the cross, the Apostle
Very
John.
holy.
Yep.
And I'm giggling like a second grader. Hopefully second graders don't know that. So
no, second graders should not be listening to this episode, or probably a lot of our episodes. But
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That's hilarious. But also, I really appreciate the point that you were making. But that's so funny.
Say, like, to have a therapist or a counselor talk to, you know,
like an apostle, like a
have an apostle,
like the Apostle John. Yes,
the Apostle John. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. Just to be absolutely clear. Yes. No, yeah. I do love that though. I think I guess part of my brain is like, wow, I can't believe we talked about that for so long without me realizing it. And I'm trying to move on from there. But I do actually have a legit thought, which is, I wonder, you know how like in a way the Lord sends his disciples out 2 by 2, right? And there's like, or like like maybe not all the time, but like isn't there a passage, or am I completely being Catholic right now?
No, you are.
The Bible.
Yeah.
Am I correct? Okay. So part of me is like, I wonder if that's part of it though, because we need the body of Christ. Like we're not supposed to be like, you know, an island. We're just not. And that's not how God made us. So even in our accompaniment of other people, we need to, and in our episode about accompaniment, I think who was it that we had on? Sister
Mary Grace.
Yeah, Sister Mary Grace. I think she mentioned that. I think she mentioned something about that. And that's really critical.
Yeah.
Can't undervalue that.
Yeah. That's so funny. We've referenced like 5 episodes at least.
I think you know, this is the nature of this episode, right? It's about you know, being with others who are suffering. So then we just talk about all the people that are suffering who've been on our episodes. So
yeah. I think I had one last thought about that too, which is there are times I think where in our suffering, you know, we want to let people out there know, like, you're not alone. And if you're in that moment of like total just losing your crap and you're just kind of like, I can't take 1 second of this. A part of this episode is to just reach out to that person and be like, you're not alone in that. And we understand that. And I think but part of it also is, while we're all still walking that, we need to be aware that there is hope. And I think those two things are both really important. It's really important, which we've done, I think, in lots of different ways, but it just occurred to me just to spell it out, to say like, hope is a really critical ingredient in the midst of suffering that we have a friend, David Patterson, who has his Instagram ministry, Yes Catholic, which everybody should check out. It's fantastic. And Erin did an episode with him on Instagram, which was awesome. And he does lots of awesome stuff. And recently, I think he posted this fantastic suffering quote, which I can't remember now, but maybe we can repost it on our Instagram. Anyways, somebody commented under it and was like, "Oh, suffering! Like, oh, I feel like I just can't stop hearing about suffering everywhere. Like, Catholicism is not just about suffering. Ugh." Like, it was like a very kind of, I'm so fed up about hearing about suffering. And I was like, this lady doesn't even know, like, there's a whole podcast that we do out there that's only about suffering.
I love it. The quote?
Yeah,
sorry,
go for
you
it.
go and then I got it.
No. Refresh us all about the quote.
So this is the quote from St. Gemma Galgani. If you really want to love Jesus, first learn to suffer, because suffering teaches you to love. And then the comment on it was, I'm so sick of the suffering narrative. Catholicism is all about suffering. Sick of it. Like,
yeah.
Oh,
that's
man,
what the person said. Yeah, Catholicism is all about suffering. And I was like, ooh, that's not true. Catholicism is not all about suffering. Like, but
mostly about suffering.
Yeah. 98% suffering.
With a side dish of resurrection. Yes,
that's right. That's right. Yeah. No, but I think when I read that, it just sort of made me chuckle. And like, I really appreciated that person, because I was like, yeah, I get it. Sometimes, we got to remember that the resurrection happened. Like, and we are people of the resurrection. The cross is the sign of victory.
Yeah. And that, like, and this is something that I feel like I think about theoretically, but find it hard to actually think about when I'm in a difficult situation. But that, if we're walking with the Lord and we're going through these little deaths with, dying to self, like sufferings with the Lord, that every single one of those sufferings will have a resurrection without exception.
Amen.
Yeah.
And Amen. So whatever, and we don't know what form that resurrection will take. Maybe it's going to be in heaven.
Yeah.
But I think often it will also be on earth, that there are going to be elements of resurrection and joy, and that happen. I have some friends who there was a really tragic situation that happened with a relative of theirs, and I won't go into details, but I didn't ask permission to share the story, so I'll just share it without sharing it. But it was just one of those situations where you're like, how could any good possibly come out of this situation? There's just no way. But that I was talking with them again, kind of a few months after the tragic event happened, and they started to describe how sort of different key people in who were involved, who had never ever been interested in faith, all of a sudden had this, like, we're seeking God and we're coming to church, and they were like, it was just like, well, this is interesting. Like, what is these, like, seeds of new life that are, makes you think of like a burnt forest, and then you have that first little sapling that starts to grow out of it, right? Just like that, there's going to be some sort of resurrection with everything that's happening. Like, but then we forget that, because I think that we bringing it back, we forget it's more vulnerable to hope for that resurrection than it is to roll over and accept the suffering.
Absolutely.
How to do that? That is not what it means to be Catholic. It is called, it's continued hope, which is, that's hard, but that is the reality.
And when you're at the cross, like, the cross feels eternal. Like, it feels eternal in that moment, because every second is so painful that it makes time longer. But then you think about like a fun experience, and it's like you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, that went by so fast, or something like that. But it makes me actually think of this one episode of Poco a Poco, which is a great podcast if you haven't checked it out, the CFRs. And Father PT was talking about how the sites of Jesus' crucifixion and the site of his resurrection are not far. Like, he would have most likely been able to see the spot where he would resurrect from the cross.
Wow.
And that's not unintentional. I think that the Lord has, like, arranged his own death and resurrection in that sense of, like, a close enough physical proximity, so the one action, like, theologically, the one action is like a single action, like the death and resurrection of Christ. It is, like, inseparable, but even physically, like, in the space, it's like, now as it stands, the spot of his crucifixion and the spot of his resurrection are in the same church, and you don't even have to go outside to walk to get from one to the other. Like,
wow, that close.
Yeah.
You just reminded me, and I know we have to get to Godwin soon, but you just remind me of, there's a cardinal in Canada, Cardinal Lacroix, and he gave a talk at a Rise Up conference once that I was at, and it was, or I don't know, a conference I was at, and he talked about in scripture, the depiction of the crucifixion. We often think that it goes dark at the moment of Jesus's death, but he said actually it's dark in the time of his agony on the cross.
Like the
And
stuff.
yeah, and when he dies, the darkness actually breaks. And I remember, I just was like, I never knew that. Like, that's so crazy. But it's because it feels so dark in the moment, in the agony. You feel like there is no light. It's so crazy because the death is surrender. Really, the death is surrender. That's really what God is asking of us in these little deaths that we have. Like, in the surrender, really the darkness breaks. So true surrender, which is always hopeful. Like, there's always hope, because you can't surrender to a God that you do not trust or you do not hope in. Surrender is a choice it's a gift almost. Like, when you think of two people who love each other, they give to one another. They're not coerced into it. They freely are gifts to one another. And I feel like in my suffering, or in the suffering of another person, that I have to surrender my will to God. It's not surrender until there's something free about it. And he works on me, and he gets me there slowly over time. And there's no shame in not being there yet, but eventually when there's like that free, like, okay, Lord, I trust you. That's actually the darkness breaking already. Like, there is light already entering into that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's beautiful. That's
Beautiful.
Well, thanks, ladies. Good to chat about this.
My mind went back to everybody needs a John. We all need a John.
Oh my goodness. This is so beautiful. I love how real it is. Yeah. So, would you like me to share my God wink on that note?
What was your
Okay, so my God wink was, season changes are always really hard for me because of the fibromyalgia. It like screws with my system, and I feel like way more tired than usual. I have more pain than usual, all those kind of things. So I've been feeling that way. Like, it's starting to lift a little bit now, but definitely September and October for sure. And I was talking to my spiritual director, and I was carrying around so much guilt about like about not being able to pray in the way that I can usually pray, or that I desire to pray, because it also affects my concentration and my so I just can't, sometimes I can't read stuff in front, like it's ridiculous. So anyways, so I was telling her about that, and she's like, listen, sometimes maybe your prayer just has to be laying on your bed and then just telling the Lord that that's what you're going to do, because you can't do anything else, and just be with him in that, And it was like something so simple, but it was such a weight off of my shoulders. And then I went out to Walmart afterwards, and I was in the store, and I was looking for something, I think, to wear to somebody's wedding. At Walmart, of the places where one goes to shop for very fancy clothing. And then I was like getting frustrated because I couldn't find anything. And then the song from Lauren Daigle came on. It was like, "Look up, child." And so I was like, that's nice, Lord. Like, you're sending that when, you're telling me like it's okay. And then I looked up, and right in front of me was exactly the kind of like cover thing that I was looking for. And I was like, oh no, literally, you wanted me to look up. Like, that's
so awesome.
That's like nice on a couple of levels, like existentially and like,
but actually just
reality.
For real.
Yeah,
right.
That's right. Yeah.
Erin, your husband is so funny.
Yeah. I know, he really is. He's got a very good sense of humor. Yes.
He's kind of perfect. It's kind of true. That's amazing. I'm gonna ask for that. Like, Lord, just direct my vision for all the things that I want.
Well, just look up, child,
Apparently.
That's awesome.
It really is.
Sweet.
Oh, all right. Well, friends, thank you for listening. And I was gonna say, look up. That sounds really
look up, John. No, that's
no. Yeah. No more Johns.
No.
Yeah.
John.
All right. We're just gonna
Oh.
right there before you read it. Okay. Have a wonderful rest of your day or night or whenever you're listening. God bless.
God bless you guys.
God
See you
bless.
next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Thicket. If you like what you hear, give us a rating and hit that subscribe button. We have new episodes every Monday with more stories and honest conversations about life when the going gets rough and the hope and humor amidst it all. We'd love for you to join our community on Instagram and Facebook at In the Thicket Podcast. While you're there, let us know how we can pray for you. God bless and see you next week.